And then in 1968, I was one of 5 UCLA students to go to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to work on the Poor People's Campaign, and we were about to leave to work for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference the day that Martin Luther King died. And so it postponed our trip a little bit. And one of the great sorrows in my life was I was days away from going to work on his staff. I was going to be a driver, a flunky, you know, I was 19 or something, I knew nothing. But to work in that environment was going to be so exciting, and then he was killed. And it was a very brutal spring, if you recall. Kennedy died, he was killed. I mean, it was a very difficult time. But we went anyway, and we worked on the Poor People's Campaign, and that's where I met Emma G., Yuji's wife. Emma G., myself, Alex Hing in San Francisco, and a guy named Charlie Chang. We were probably the 4 Asian Americans in the entire Poor People's Campaign. Still yet, we were pretty much ignored even by poverty advocates, so mostly blacks, Latinos, Native Americans. So I continued to work in that vein. It was a very exciting and dynamic period, but it was a very sad period. You know, with the killing of Malcolm X, and then the killing of King, and then the killing of Robert Kennedy, and all of that within a very short period of time. There was both excitement and a lot of depression and a lot of sadness. So we held together, part of it, because of all of that. But it was really interesting for a 19-year-old kid to be running around and going to these meetings and listening to these leaders talk about the kinds of change that we were going to try to make in America. The other thing is we were meeting people from all over the country who were coming to Washington in the call for poor people to come and stay in America. The phrase was, we're going to stay in Washington until hunger ends in America. And we really believed it. You know, we really believed it. At one time, young Jesse Jackson, who was, I could calculate his age based on me, but he wasn't that much older than me. So I'm driving him, I was his chauffeur from driving him around a little bit. And we went to a demonstration at the Department of Agriculture, and it was about 300 or 400 of us. And we walked into the department, and he said, let's go get lunch. So we all walked in the agriculture department, and we started getting food from the cafeteria and lunch. And all of a sudden, somebody noticed that we're there and came out and said, who's paying for this? Who's paying for this? And Jesse Jackson jumps up on the table. Well, here's how we're going to pay for it. The American people owe the poor people of America some millions of dollars. He said, take it off our bill. And we all walked out. I mean, it was a very powerful time, because we had all these people gathered in what was known as Resurrection City, which was basically the muddiest, smelliest place I've ever lived in. We lived in these plywood tents, I suppose, but it was the wettest winter, or wettest summer they've had in decades. It rained constantly, and we were walking around in mud, and it was just a mess. But every day we went out and protested somewhere in the city, and it was pretty exciting. It was life-changing for me for a negative reason, though, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. At the end of the summer, the National Guard surrounded the camp and arrested everybody. And so we were all in jail, and it scared the hell out of me. I'm in a southern jail in Washington, D.C. It is as southern can be. It was hot, it was miserable, and I was in a room, a very small room with maybe 50 other young protesters. The interesting thing, these young kids, which were maybe younger than me, I was 19, they were 15, and well, they were older people. They had been in so many of these things. They had been in jail so many times. These are the same kids that the police dogs would attack. They'd been in the hosing. They had done it all. On the other hand, I was scared to death. I mean, I was really scared to death. And so I had a difficult time with that. And so what happened was we went in front of the judge, and the leadership says, we want everybody to plead no contest and to get the maximum time you can get, because we're going to fill the jails of Washington, D.C. This really scared me. And so I shouldn't probably tell this story because it's just, but it molded me so much. But so we went in front of the court, and the judge says to me, he's this is nothing but a sea really of black faces in me. I don't remember it being multiracial because there were other Latinos and stuff, but in any case, he looks at me, and obviously I'm sticking out. He says, where the hell did you come from? I said, well, you know. He said, where are you from? I said, oh, Los Angeles. He says, are you a student? I said, yeah. He says, I'm going to ruin your life. He says, I'm going to find you guilty. You're never going to be able to do anything in your life. You're never going to be licensed. You're never going to be able to practice law. I had no intention of practicing law. Blah, 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 blah. He says, unless you leave town today. And I said, so all of my colleagues, they're pleading guilty. They're going to stay in jail forever, right? Or whatever. And I said, they're sweating. And I said, okay, I'm out of here. And so he said, you have to leave Washington, D.C. by the end of, I guess it was late evening, by the end of the next day. So they let me out. I got out. But it changed me about how I needed to be committed to a movement and to justice and equity. Because I couldn't fulfill that obligation, I needed to figure out other ways to do it throughout my whole life. And so it's really one of those changing things. This is like late August. In January of the next year, I read an article in the Los Angeles Times that the last inmates from the Poor People's Camp were finally let out of jail. And I had been a privileged quarter at UCLA my final year by then, or no, I guess my junior year by then. I thought, you better rethink this. You better rethink what is your commitment and what a jerk you are, and why weren't you able to make that ultimate, that level of sacrifice? And so it really did have a big influence on how I led the rest of my life.